Why are therapists always blaming and shaming parents for their children's problems? Why can't children just grow up and learn that their parents are human too? I'm going to show you why it's actually very healthy for your child to be detached from you and separate from you. Again, my name's Kate. I'm a marriage and family therapist, but just because I'm a therapist doesn't mean I'm your therapist. So take what you like and leave the rest with this video, because I know the estranged parents are going to be coming for me on it. I'm going to go through the family life cycle. It's 3 phases: attachment, detachment, and connection. Attachment is literally when the child is in the womb and their whole world is determined by the parent's world. They're here in the middle and you're on the outside. Unless this is adequately nurtured in them, they do not have their own sense of self. They depend on they think of the parent and them as one. It's called actually enmeshment. And it's very healthy when a child depends on the parent for all of their needs. But at some point, these 2 phases have to occur. And typically in family systems, attachment is the way you were born, but it's not always supposed to be that way. Adolescence is a time of detachment. Ages like 3 to 12 are when the parenting is actually happening. Adolescence is when the parents shift roles and become more of a guide. Maybe a better metaphor is the kid comes from the back seat to the passenger seat. And so the parent is still like in control, obviously, but there is a healthy detachment that takes place where the child has their own thoughts, their own opinions, their own personality, their own identity, and it is separate from the parents. And so it is actually a very healthy thing. Now, the reason for that estrangement is happening children's 20s is because parents did not do a good job of detaching. Maybe they did not nurture their children emotionally very well. And so the child doesn't have a sense of themselves. And so when they hit adolescence and their brain is developing, they are making decisions that really scare the parent. And instead of a parent, again, being more of a guide and not letting fear override them, the parent reacts in fear and punishment, taking away their phones, their social media, instead of being like, hey, my child is going to leave in the next couple years. I should probably be more of a guide and help them develop their own sense of things. Detachment scares the parent, and so the parent kind of goes back to their old attachment ways of telling the kid what to do, etc., etc. Parents themselves have very unhealthy attachment styles. They can be very enmeshed with their children. Enmeshed meaning that everything their child does, it feels like a reflection on them as a parent. And so that activates their own attachment fears. And so they end up over-parenting, whether that's letting the kid run free and do whatever, or being really scared and not letting them do anything. And so healthy detachment never occurs. When the kid goes to therapy in their 20s because they're dealing with substance abuse issues, or they can't do well at work, or they are struggling with an eating disorder, or they can't figure out their relationships, what happens is we as therapists see that they have never healthily and safely detached from their parent. And so in order for the child to actually create an internal sense of self, it is healthy to, when they say, yeah, my parents yelled at me, to be like, woof, how did that make you feel? Help the child develop their own sense of the world by kind of being the opposite. And to emotionally immature parents that don't understand their own attachment issues, that feels threatening. And so they blame the therapist, they blame social media, instead of looking at themselves and be like, I actually did not let my child detach in a healthy way because I was really scared. Maybe I listened to my church's messages about obedience and I believe all that stuff. And so I just missed my child completely. And now when they're in their 20s, they only have a sense of self in opposition to me. And that is sad because life is happening, marriages are happening, grandchildren are happening, and I feel so helpless. What I want to reassure you is that us therapists, we kind of know what we're doing. I know that in being opposition to the child and them developing their own sense of self, they are going to learn to tolerate and create space for their own experience and their parents' experience. To tolerate their emotional experience being different than their parents. That is such a healthy thing to do. Parents that have their own attachment issues look at that and they're like, oh, the child's just not respecting me. And it's like, that's not what's happening at all. If you understand developmentally that it's healthy for your child to think that you are a bad parent, because you probably were in a lot of ways, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. And that's your own attachment stuff you need to figure out. But that's the only way to real connection. Otherwise, the child's going to detach. They're going to learn their own standards in their life, and that people telling them blindly to respect them doesn't work for them. They are grown adults with husbands, wives, partners, and children. They're not going to tolerate someone telling them what to do. They're not going to tolerate someone being like, hey, I need you to come home for Christmas, or, things are going to be strained. Like, they're not going to tolerate that. So you can either look at your own attachment stuff, face that stuff so that you can meet them here in connection, which is where all of us therapists are really working towards. You just don't understand what we're doing. You don't understand the healing process, and you're making assumptions based on this phase of detachment that you do not understand is actually developmentally appropriate.